podcast.
Is that the new theme song?
Yep.
I have thought about bringing in my guitar at some point so we could like record a silly little podcast song.
A new theme song?
Yeah.
What do you think of our theme song? You're a musician.
I think it's good. The only problem is that it's also in my audio library thumb drive of songs.
Can't use that.
And so I can't use that because then in the middle of a documentary, someone will think the podcast is about to start.
Yeah. They're like, oh, wait a second. I got to go listen to the dulcet tones of Danny and Jeremy.
Yeah, it'll be like Pavlov's podcast listener. They'll start salivating.
It'll almost be as bad as the Discord ping that's in the Fallout 76 doc.
Or in every doc now.
Or it's also in many episodes of this podcast because I keep leaving the speakers on over there. I think what happens is I have the speakers because I have my headphone plugged into the speakers. So when I plug it out to do the podcast over here. So right now, presumably, it's open again. So it could happen right now.
There's a chaotic situation where it could happen at any moment.
So just like the gun.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah, it's Chekhov's Discord notification.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Noclip podcast. This is the purest podcast of them all, because it includes just myself and Jeremy Jane. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm wonderful. Glad to be here. Glad to be here on the purest podcast of all.
It's nice to talk to you because we've spent most of the past 2 weeks sitting next to very close to each other, within 10 feet, 12 feet?
Probably less than. I think that's if a grown man laid down on the floor between us, I think he would span the gap.
Would you have his head or his toes? Which would you if we hired somebody to lie down between us, would you prefer to have their face looking up at you or their stinky toes underneath your desk?
My gut reaction is I don't want the feet near me.
Okay.
But I think the social anxiety of having a man staring up at me from below all day would really hinder my editing.
All right, let's play with this. What if it was a lady?
Less social anxiety, but still weird.
Okay, what if the person didn't blink?
Increasing social anxiety exponentially.
What if they blinked but they didn't breathe?
So
they're alive because they're blinking.
Jesus. Yeah, if they don't blink, I'd be able to write it off as a mannequin. But if any one function, honestly, it's all or nothing. If they're blinking but not breathing, terrifying. Some sort of demonic homunculus.
What if they acted almost completely normally, except every hour they asked you an invasively personal question, and I also heard it, so I'm waiting for you to answer it.
Oh God! As long as the podcast isn't running when it's happening, that's fine. It's like I'm an open book. Man.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
I got nothing to hide.
Well, we have nothing to hide here on Noclip, and that's why we're going to spend the next, we're usually under an hour or so, talking about everything we did this year. Well, not everything, but everything we put up on the YouTube channel this year.
Yeah, everything would take a really long time. I vacuumed yesterday. That doesn't need to be mentioned.
Yeah, I changed a lot of nappies.
Yeah.
That's probably if you got XP for nappies, I probably would have, what's it called in Call of Duty again when you get to 60?
You would prestige.
Prestiged. I've prestiged in...
You're a prestige diaper changer.
She's never pooped on me.
Yeah?
And I've never been weed on either, but I guess that's a boy thing probably.
Maybe.
More so.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so I don't know. Shouldn't have said that. So you know what's going to happen now.
You've jinxed it, yeah. When you prestige as a diaper changer, do you become terrible at changing diapers, but you're you get to wear a cool suit? What's the gameplay mechanic there?
I think you forget how to change nappies, but all of your kids' diapers are camo or gold.
The digital camo, little squares.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. Or wood finish.
Yeah.
Like an AK-47.
That's. I would love the idea that your child is a Kalashnikov from.
Well, it is the favorite gun of child soldiers all around the world.
Well, there you go.
So, this got dark. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast as it's evolved or devolved over the past, 10 episodes. This is episode 20, I believe, and 10 was kind of when we rejigged it and brought it in here. So in January, there's a big load of changes coming to Noclip. Just in terms of the output, you're going to see a lot of that this month with the frenetic output with Hades going up, Bastion going up, which you're editing at the moment, the Outer Wilds going up that I'm currently editing, and of course we had the Tim Willett stock, and we'll have all the Edmund McMillan stuff kind of coming after that. So there's a bunch of stuff coming, but also stuff we're filming here in the studio is going to start going up. So that's cool. So this is kind of our last opportunity, I guess, to kind of close the book on not just the year that was 2019, but kind of the Noclip that was for the past 3 years. And the way we collaborated and worked in the past, which was that we wouldn't see each other for long periods of time, and then we'd pop up in Warsaw or something, or
make a quick documentary.
Yeah, exactly, and then put it out, and then kind of go into our own little holes again. So originally, I was thinking about doing like a Game of the Year podcast. My list is going to go up on giantbomb.com. I always do one for them, but I think we were both in the same boat where we didn't really play a lot of the games that came out this year, or if we did, we didn't like complete them.
Yeah, I always thought that I would be a really bad video games journalist because I kind of just play whatever calls to me. Like I don't want to play games because I'm like, oh, this is I want to be able to talk about this game. I play games that call to me in the moment, kind of like, you know, if you want to read a book, you read it really quick. But
then how will you learn to hate games, Jeremy?
I'm trying. I learned to hate games, and now I'm unlearning to hate games by going back and like I played Mother 3, the sequel to Earthbound this year.
Right.
That can't be my game of the year.
I mean, it could be every year, I guess. Isn't it your favorite game ever?
Breath of the Wild has been my game of the year for a few years now.
Yeah, like Rocket League for me, probably.
Yeah, it's just locked in there.
Yeah, I drank last night and played some Rocket League.
Nice.
And got banned for jumping out of a game accidentally / on purpose.
I thought you were spamming the chat, maybe.
Like, I'm always spamming
a sarcastic,
the chat.
nice goal.
What a save! What a save! Yeah, great pass. Yeah. Hey, great pass. I'm just sitting here.
Not.
Yeah, there should be
a not button.
They don't need a not button. They worded it so cleverly that the not button can be implied or not.
Yeah,
depending on the circumstances.
Yeah, it's the ambiguity of sarcasm just hanging in the air.
Yeah,
like a miasma of social anxiety.
I just saw Adam Beckwith, who we didn't interview for the Rocket League doc, but who was one of the Beckwiths of Beckwith Park. Tweeting that Rocket League was his game of the decade.
Wonderful.
It would be, because he made it. But it's fun having everyone talking about game of the decade, because that's kind of what you're talking about as well. Like,
yeah.
Everyone's like, you know, my favorite game this year is this, but like, it's still not better than Breath of the Wild is the one that comes up quite a lot.
Yeah, it's hard to talk. A friend of mine who played Breath of the Wild, who never plays games, was asking me for other games like Breath of the Wild.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, let me put together a list. And then I thought about it, and it's like, there's kind of there are like adventure games, but the way it like that game ties together so many systems that like there are games where you can climb, and there are open world games, and there's like colorful fantasy kind of adventures. Like Fable kind of scratches that itch in some ways, but there's like nothing. It's just like it opened up this new world of games that I want to play.
Or like, in a way, I think there are things that it does that other games have done, but I think it's a bit more people have played Breath of the Wild. Like, I guess it depends on the facet of the game that he wanted to have in other games, because if it's like that notion of like player-led discovery, then like Outer Wilds is 100% that. In fact, it makes Zelda look basic by comparison. So the one that came up in the Outer Wilds doc actually was Wind Waker.
Oh yeah,
because that whole aspect of going to an island and then learning it and doing all that.
That was actually one of my suggestions. For
cool.
Breath of the Wild was like, if you can kind of like work backwards and appreciate older control schemes, I think Wind Waker scratches a lot of that adventure itch.
Isn't there a new release of it? They did a 3DS one or something.
Oh, did they?
I believe.
I've never had a DS or a 3DS or anything.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't think it's on Switch. I don't know. Podcast at noclip.video. Let us know. Yeah, I don't know. What other games did you enjoy this year? What kind of popped out? Might as well talk about it a bit.
I think
like the name ones that hadn't necessarily came out this year.
Yeah. No, Salt and Sanctuary might be one of the favorites I played this year.
Awesome.
I also recently tried when I visited Boston, played co-op for the first time with a friend of mine, and it's so fun and it works so well because Salt and Sanctuary is, for those of you who don't know, is a platformer, very like Castlevania, Dark Souls ish, kind of like Dark Souls made Castlevania into a 3D game, and then Salt and Sanctuary like took it back into a 2D game.
Right.
So it's like a demake. Yeah. But the interesting thing about it is that the platforming is like, it's kind of difficult, but it's only really difficult because there's bad dudes shooting poison arrows at you and stuff.
It's difficult because you've been playing Mario for 20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Just jumping on everyone.
Yeah, totally. Right. So but it's fun to add co-op into the mix because it gets so chaotic. Where it's like it's like having.
Can you hurt each other?
You cannot hurt each other, but there are platforms that like dissipate when you stand on them for a second. So you have to be like, all right, 3, 2, 1, let's go, and then you both have to jump at the same time. But yeah, Salt and Sanctuary is one of my highlights of the year. It was a lot of the like boss based challenge of Dark Souls, like that core loop loop of, oh, you go into a new area, there's new bad guys to fight, kind of like gotta die a bunch of times to figure out what's going on. You get to the boss, and then you're like, okay, the new loop is beating the boss, and then repeat that for like 20 areas with a little Metroidvania, and I'm happy.
Speaking of Dark Souls, Sekiro is the game that I wish I had the mental space for. I think I'm going to play it over the break a bit more.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the one that got away that it probably would have been up there if not. I mean, everyone knows how much I have fawned over Outer Wilds since it first came out. Replaying it now for the dock for capturing this stuff has been fantastic. Just a lot of fun. And yeah, I don't know. The Apple Arcade stuff ended up being really good. Like there was a bunch of really great games that popped up, especially that first week. There was 4 or 5 fantastic games. I got to finally play Overland, not in beta form. Grindstone, the Cappy game, was loads of fun. And what's it called? I always forget the name of it. Sayonara Wild Hearts, I think is the name of it. Yeah, that was a lot of fun as well. That was cool. That was kind of like a throwback to 2008 or 2009 when everyone was playing whatever Angry Birds and Doodle Jump on their phones. So yeah, it was good. It was good. I played a lot of the big games that came out this year, and Control I have to go back and play more of. It didn't really grab me yet. Of course, I played Death Stranding, which is, I'm not sure if it's a game I still don't know. It's not good necessarily. It's not bad. It's there. It may be the second best Strand game I've played this year, because I played Watam for 4 hours last night, which was a lot of fun. Keita Takahashi's latest, I don't know what you call it, playground, let's say, game is. I guess it is a game. Yeah, it's cool. It's a lot of fun. I've enjoyed that as well. Late contender. I
was thinking Death Stranding is like recommending Death Stranding to someone is like seeing Lars von Trier's Antichrist, and your friends are like, oh, we want to see a movie tonight. What should we watch? And you're like, listen, this is a movie where someone like self-mutilates with scissors, and like you can watch it and it's an experience and it's like it's worth having, but recommending it to another person is like, it's like telling your friend to take a ton of mushrooms. It's like, I don't want to be responsible for however you feel after that happens, but like maybe you should think about it.
Yeah. Consider it.
Yeah.
Give it a go. So yeah, I guess that was the year in games, 2019, 2020. I'm looking forward to playing all the 2019 games I've missed.
Yeah, Sekiro is going to be my game of the year next year.
Yeah, exactly.
I can already feel it.
Will it be one of our documentaries? Well, probably not, because they keep turning us down, but you never know. But let's go through the documentaries that we made in the year 2019 and kind of remind ourselves of some of the high points and low points.
Ooh.
I don't know what the low points are. The last day of editing, usually, when I'm just so tired.
Yeah, the last 1%.
Totally. The first video we put up was on January 2nd. It was an interview with Jeff Keighley about the Game Awards.
That's a goodie. Also very relevant because that just happened again.
It did. That was that was kind of one of the first times we did like a proper breakaway interview from a regular one. Like, we were there talking to him, and the next video went up was the Cory Barlog one.
Yeah.
About directing God of War, which has done like over 200K, which was just like I guess it was long enough. I think I just did a bunch of like gameplay in there and just fudged it up a bit. But I mean, we talked to Corey for like an hour plus about Half-Life that day. And the same with Jeff. We were there lying Jeff Keighley. I don't blame him for not spilling the beans about there being a Half-Life VR game in development he knew about.
Yeah.
But it is funny. The comments on the Half-Life doc as well have been really interesting in the past few weeks. So people are going back and being like, Jeff lied. And I was like, well, what else are you going to say?
Yeah, what is he going to just be like, listen, guys, I'm not supposed to say this, but I know this is going on YouTube, but there's this thing you should know about. I don't know if this is mine to reveal, but yeah. Also, I love that the God of War doc ended up... like they made an actual documentary about the making of God of War, and a few people thought we made it because we did the Cory Barlog video. Yeah,
it was fun. I knew about that project before it came out because we obviously know a bunch of people over there at Sony we did the Horizon Zero Dawn documentary, and that's kind of how we learned or met a bunch of those folks. But this was one of those situations where knowing people really, really mattered, because you're like calling up Sony and being like, because they handle everything to do with anyone who's underneath their first party system, right? Their worldwide studio system. So if we want to interview Cory Barlog about what sandwich he had that day, we'd need to go through Sony. So it was really interesting to call them up and be like, yeah, we're doing a documentary about Half-Life. And we want to interview Corey about Half-Life because he said he'd be interested over Twitter. Like, is that okay? And they were super cool about the whole thing, thankfully. But yeah, it had come up as well that I knew this thing was being done, and I think they didn't really know what they were going to do, and I think with all the footage they shot, they weren't sure how to frame it, maybe. And I think when I look at it now, knowing that they were kind of like reaching out a little bit, being like, we don't do commercial work or anything, but like, you know, Noclip is a entirely crowdfunded thing and advertising free and all that, and nothing goes up on the channel is paid for. But it was kind of cool. It'd be like, oh, that might be a fun thing to do. You know, there are projects that are like commercial that we'd never put up on Noclip that I'd be like, oh, maybe it would be fun to like collaborate on that thing or whatever. It didn't happen with this one, but I think what happened was, have you seen that documentary?
I've seen bits of it. I haven't sat down and watched it. And
so they have a whole thing where they sit down they have like a dinner party or a garden party or something where they're reminiscing about the whole thing. I think that ended up being the thing they filmed then to marry the whole thing.
Oh, really?
Because otherwise it was kind of a lot of disjointed B-roll, like the same thing we have with Hades, kind of, before we do our interviews. So yeah, and then speaking of Hades, developing Hell Episode 2.
Nice segue.
Do you remember filming this one? Because the first one went up in December, and that was all at the Game Awards.
Yes.
So the second one was about patching.
Yeah, and that was the first time that I kind of embedded with them at their studio for a long period of time. Yeah, that was really cool. It was also kind of a different type of thing, because when you and I were down in LA...
I wasn't in LA.
No, not for the Game Awards. When you previous to that, when we were down there filming some of the stuff, like
Corey
filming with Jeff and Corey, you and I like went out and got dinner and we talked about this project. And I remember being really not like nervous about it, but like a little intimidated by the prospect, because you and I have always worked as a duo.
Yeah.
And there's a big sort of compartmentalization of the assets that we bring to this, which is really nice, because I can kind of just focus on making things look nice and sound nice and those things, and let you worry about what's going to be said.
I can focus on that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work for one person.
Totally.
Like, it's a lot of work for two people.
Yes,
to be
absolutely.
honest. Like, we're already spread pretty thin.
Totally. So the prospect of like, oh yeah, you will just go in and you just like set up the shot, the lights, and the odd mics, and then you ask all the questions, and then you make sure everyone's like cool. You get a like I was just like, Jesus Christ, like it sounded very intimidating.
Yeah.
And then it's been really cool, because all of the Supergiant people are so cool and nice, and it's been so fun. Like, I basically just feel like I hang out with them and just like talk about their awesome games for a while. And it's funny, because I think that's the case with a lot of cool projects, is the things that feel intimidating to you often end up being the most fulfilling or the most exciting, or like something like that. So yeah, that's been really cool. Like that was really different. We also rarely get to talk to developers over a long period of time.
Yeah.
We just pop in and talk to them for a few days about something and then pop out. So it's been cool having like a continued correspondence with them.
Yeah, it's changed. Like me being on the periphery, even it's changed. It's really interesting where, you know, my sort of journalism, I don't even know what I call it, background, but like my journalism sensibilities of being like really wanting to make sure that there's a bit of a pocket of distance between me and them, that I'm like, you know, friendly and jovial and whatnot, but not like pally to the point where if somebody says something that then I'd feel bad putting it in a documentary, that whole thing. But like when you're filming something over the course of months and what is now a year, so we're into our second year on this project, it definitely, there is that element. And I mean, I also like knew Greg. I was a fan of Greg before when he was editor of GameSpot, and then I've come to know him, and I've come to know all of them now, probably only recently from moving back and whatnot. But it does totally change that dynamic. So it's interesting. I think it's been fun breaking away and doing the three separate game ones, but I am actually kind of more interested to jump back now into filming Hades again.
Yeah,
like I think it'll be fun, because it's been a while.
Yeah,
since
totally.
we did the last one.
Yeah, and we've like built up. I've said this in previous things. I think I said it on the podcast, but it was at first like being a wildlife photographer, where I was like kind of like hiding in the bushes and like trying to not alarm them so that I'd get natural footage. And now they're we have a comfortable rapport. So it'll be cool to go back after a break, because I feel like they'll be excited to film as well and like talk about all the things they've been working on, and there won't be any of the anxiety of like, what's this going to be? Because we've done it so many times. Like it's old, not old hat, but it's comfortable for us. It's comfortable for them. So it'll be fun to go back and see.
I think the other sort of thing that this reminds me of a little bit, just listen to you there, is that when we started this, getting close to them, I felt like, oh, what that's going to do is it's going to like maybe kneecap us a little bit in terms of our ability to be like super critical of stuff. And what actually I think it's done is it's really allowed them to open up in a way that most developers don't with us. And I feel the same way even just about being here, getting people like Jim Crawford on or Frank Cifaldi. Like our sort of relationship with the development community is changing whether we like it or not. Like people kind of look at us as like, oh, they're like trying to understand, like we're kind of doing, I guess we're doing good just because we're not, we're sort of friends of the industry in a way, because the stuff we do is generally, trying to communicate the more difficult aspects of their job to people and sort of doing that stuff. And I think that I always be very sensitive of like, oh, that just makes us like, we're just playing along now. We're just like doing marketing for all these people. But actually what I think is interesting about working with Supergiant is that, like, especially in the Transistor one, like they open up about stuff that they've never opened up about, which they are only doing because they've come to know us and they know that we're not going to, fuck them, basically. We're not going to like make that the headline or something. You know what I mean? Like we'll handle in a I don't know, a decent kind of manner. And actually, that wasn't intentional, but the next documentary we did is almost entirely because of that.
Yes.
Which is the Astroneer doc. So that ended up being, we had another project, which I can now say was the Hitman doc, which got pulled last minute. We were going to Copenhagen the end of January, start of February or something, and it got pulled. And I was talking to Samantha Kalman, who is now left System Era. She's living in London now, going to school and working on other stuff probably. But she had talked, we'd met maybe like I know Sam going back years, so I think maybe it was like 2 years earlier at E3 or something. We'd had a conversation about it, and then she connected me with Joe, who is their PR person. He's not like I feel so, he's the type of person who wears like 12 hats. Yes. He does, like, he's been recording dev diaries with them for years.
He's like a filmmaker and a PR guy. And
super nice guy as well.
Totally.
Snappy dresser too.
Oh, there you go. Is he listening?
I don't know, actually. Yeah.
And he's handsome too.
Call me.
Yeah.
Also, his partner is a friend of ours as well, who's also really rad.
Still call me.
Yeah. So, I guess I had been talking to him, maybe going back maybe even 6 months or something, about like, we'll figure this out once you've launched it maybe or something. And then I basically just hit him up and was like, look, not to rush this out, but I guess you guys are coming up on launch. I'd be comfortable filming a retrospective now if you are, even though the game's not out yet. Would you want to? And then, had I told you about the sort of sensitivity of the project probably around that time?
I think you gave me like a bit of an overview of it, but I think I didn't really realize, like you told me the situation, but I didn't realize how integral to the doc and to the whole process it was going to be until we kind of got there.
I don't think I did either.
Yeah.
I think once I was there and then realized like, oh, they're like working, this is like a wake. Like they are working around, they're working on pieces that their fallen friend worked on, and like they can't escape it, and it's been years. So I don't think I was necessarily prepared for quite how on the surface all that feeling was. And it definitely ended up being like one of the harder interviews.
Yeah.
I think we all hugged at the end of that one.
Yeah,
Adam's one.
There was a long period too where we just kind of like killed the cameras and just like
we did.
talked in the middle of it, and it was like, Adam's a cool guy. Adam, if you're out there,
he's a lovely dude.
Yeah, he's been also like, I feel like we've corresponded with him a lot since then, and like talked on Twitter and stuff, and it's cool. Like that's the cool thing about this work that I didn't realize when we started it is like. You obviously you forge connections with people and build rapport, and they come to expect like a certain level of journalistic integrity or documentary integrity. Like they know that we have good intentions and stuff. Like that's something you know that you want to build over time. But it's interesting the personal connections that get forged.
Right.
Like Adam, when we were doing Extra Life, like Adam just reached out and was like, I'm watching in my pajamas from bed, and like sent a picture of his setup and was like, good job guys, like keep it going.
Yeah.
And, like, it's cool. Like it's cool that we get to forge those personal connections too. And like like create friendships, not just professional connections through this stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely, it allows you to get into, not that we're doing it to manipulate people or in any way or anything like that, but it definitely allows you to get into a space with people where they kind of open up a bit more. I'd forgotten about all that sort of stuff. Actually, I hadn't thought about it in a while, but I mean the ending documentary I'm super proud of. I think it was it was really fast as well. We were only in there for like 2 days. You had very little time to get B-roll. The interviews were pretty frenetic on that one, I remember, as well.
Yeah.
Up in Seattle. You also filmed all that cool stuff in the house, which ended up being super useful for telling that part of the story.
Yeah. It was very rainy and evocative weather the whole time we were up there. And it was
good
kind of
old
like
pathetic fallacy.
Yeah. It was like pouring outside during Adam's interview, and like the weather was bad for filming, but good for atmospheric B-roll.
Thanks, Seattle.
Yeah, right.
8 months of the year.
The other thing I was thinking is when you said like sitting down for an interview kind of forces you to have those more intense or in-depth conversations. I've said this to you off mic, but it's funny how like, because we're editing so much when we're here, it's funny how the podcast is like, let's sit down and converse for an hour. And I was joking to you that I should just have a podcast with every friend of mine in my life. Like, it does, like, you don't even have to record on it. Just like sit down and just like intentionally talk for an hour. And the interviews are a similar process where people come and they know that they're going to talk about a certain set of things, but then because it's so intentional, it's like, let's have like some of the conversations that we have on podcasts are more intense than conversations I have with friends when we like go out for a drink. And it's cool. It's very like intentional. It's like you accelerate the friendship. What was the Werner Herzog thing you told me about? I don't know if you can remember it off. Putting you on the spot here, but he was saying that like maybe we talked about this. Maybe he was talking about his Gorbachev documentary, and he was saying that you only have like a second to build rapport, so you just have to like assume the rapport is already there.
No.
Maybe we hadn't talked about this. But he talks about how interviewing, you have to sit down and like form an instant rapport with someone because you're getting into deep topics immediately.
Right.
And so it's like this weird sacred container for accelerated human connection or something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's cool though.
Yeah, because everyone knows when you sit down that you're going to be talking for an hour.
Yeah.
So it totally changes the dynamic of that.
Yeah, you're not like, I could leave in 15 minutes if I'm like, oh yeah, I left the stove on, and like
totally. No, once you put that camera in front of people's eyes, they're stuck.
Yeah.
Rabbit in the headlights. We ended up going, myself and Esteban ended up going to, we tried something out for kind of fun, which was, there was a press event for Mortal Kombat on Chicago, and somebody invited us, and we were like, well, I won't go unless like Ed Boon and some people are there and we can interview them. And they were like, yeah, they're going to be there, and we'll do like short interviews, like 20-minute interviews. So we flew up that morning in the snow to Chicago. We got to this area. They bussed us. We did a tour of NetherRealm. They bussed us to a place. We played the game and then got to interview a bunch of the people for like 20 minutes only. So it just ended up being like a interesting exercise in, I don't know, really trying to use all the buffalo, I guess.
Yeah.
And it ended up being really good. Like, those videos were short. They're fun. They're not, one's only 5 minutes long or something. It's pretty short. The other one's 10. And they seem to be well received. And again, it was between that and the Corey Barlog and Jeff Keighley stuff really let me into the idea of like, oh, we can make these smaller, kind of like we did with the GDC session stuff, but like they can be, we're actually good also at getting these smaller videos out that are hyper interesting, that are like kind of focused. So that was fun. And also, I don't know, there was something about the preview. This was another one of like, we're covering a game before it comes out, but like there's a different way of doing it than we did with the 76 stuff.
Yeah.
And this helped a lot, where it was kind of just like design elements about, it wasn't like, don't rattle off a bunch of features about your game, but tell us about them and how they work.
Yeah.
And like why you did certain things.
Plus, you're not locked into creating an entire documentary about it, so you can kind of just have a more like anthropological, like dipping in and kind of just observing approach.
Totally.
Instead of being like, all right, let's get the whole story, and then you have to build it into this big like structure of information that you're responsible for.
Which is why we've turned down some stories over the years, because they're just too big. But it's like now with the studio, I'm like, oh, we can totally do those. Like we've got an interesting guest coming in January for an upcoming game, and I'm looking forward to interviewing them about something kind of tertiary about the whole project. Now I want to tell you what it is, but you know who it is, but we'll leave that for another day. But it's like, it's opening new avenues of us like making fun documentaries.
Listen, Shigeru Miyamoto is coming, and you all need to know it's happening.
He's absolutely not going. I mean, maybe he will come, but I don't know anything about it. So if you're pulling that one off,
I set it up.
Yeah,
this is a surprise. Merry Christmas.
We actually have 2 people coming that week. Now that I think about it, 2 groups. Yeah, well, 1 group, and yeah.
This is a hot tease.
Let's keep moving. Speaking of lots of interviews we filmed and then didn't do anything with yet, the GDC sessions. We filmed. God, how many did we do this year? I think we did a trailer saying how many.
15, I think it said.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Oh boy, yeah. So we got some of them out, and sorry, not done. I keep saying it like it's all about the views. They've all been well received. We did one on the return of Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines, which went out pretty soon after that because they announced it at GDC.
Yeah,
that was great with Brian Mitsoda. A lot of fun. Those folks are real fun. His wife also works at System
Era, yeah.
So it was kind of
weird connection.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We did one with Chandana Ekanaika, or I think he goes by Eka, on Falcon Age, which was a lot of fun. That dude is super rad. And we got more out during the year, not too many more. We got the Celeste one out, we got the Long Dark one with Raphael van Lerup, and we're still sitting on that. The Genital Jousting one I have almost edited.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then the Tarn Adams one, oh boy. I think we should just stick the whole thing up. We've talked about that enough, I guess.
He's such a character.
He's a dude. Let's talk about the other thing we filmed at GDC, which then you went off and filmed some of it illegally, perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let's not get into that.
we'll speak broadly about it.
Our Telltale documentary.
Yeah.
We interviewed 4 people who worked at Telltale in the past. That was another one that was involved a lot of emails and talking to people and people turning us down, and I think I reached out to maybe 20 people, and those were the 4 that said yes, and those 20 were people that we had vetted, or I went through a process with some people who worked at Telltale over who we should talk to, who we shouldn't talk to maybe, and who would be available and who still lived around. And they have a Facebook group which they operate, which I guess a lot of these people were involved in this process, so they were kind of helping along with the whole thing. But I'm not surprised that people were a little bit curious about why we were doing it or what the angle was going to be, because in one of those stories you couldn't help but have an angle.
Yeah,
like which version of this story. I mean, every documentary is kind of like choosing which lie you're willing to tell or you're going to tell, but this one especially is kind of like, oh, you need to, like, what's this story? And it was kind of, we settled on the experience of what it's like being fired and working at a place that you really loved, and how managerial and ineptitude can, screw over hundreds of people, and how this keeps happening in the game development community, and even worse so in America because of just labor laws over here.
Yeah, it's also like it's interesting because you do kind of have to take a side on things like that, but I think a safe bet for us was just taking the side of the human beings who were affected, and just kind of trying to, like, amplify their experience so that other people can understand it. Because the doc wasn't about, like, and this is the villain and this is the man responsible.
Yeah, totally.
Like, it was just about, this sucks. Like, it's really it's a bad thing that happened to these people, and their experience is important to amplify because we can learn from it and do, like, the industry can do better as a result of something terrible that happened. But yeah, that was a cool one. That was very effective. The trailer that you did for it affected me a lot, where it was sound bites from the interviews, a cut over the B-roll that I had shot of the old Telltale offices and some of the stuff around the North Bay, but it didn't show any of the subjects, and it was just very like I don't know, it just felt like empty and haunted. Like, those hallways felt like almost like spooky, haunted with sadness. Yeah,
all the footage you've shot that was like, because you didn't get that much of the inside of the building for obvious reasons.
I wonder why.
But you got more than I was expecting, shall we say. But those were the most evocative to me, and I was like, oh, that's it. Like, those shots are the story.
Yeah.
Like, the scale of this. And the issue I guess I was having was that we only had 4 people we interviewed, and I was like, how do we tell the story? Is that enough to sort of then umbrella the whole thing and be like, oh, and imagine now this many people? So at the start it was kind of like, especially with the trailer, I was battling against I wanted to show the emptiness, but also I only had 4 interviews.
Yeah. So
a 2-minute video with 4 people really emphasizes the fact that you've only interviewed 4 people.
Yeah.
And even in the doc, you can stay with one person for a long time and get them to tell that story, and it doesn't have that sense. So it ended up kind of just like happening in a way where it was kind of like, oh, I'll just keep using all this B-roll. And then I tried to not have any of the B-roll where people were in it, except for our friend rolling the keg, which I think I left in.
He's rolling the tires.
A tire it was, yeah. I thought it was a keg because it was outside a bar.
No, it was outside of a bar. It's funny that you mentioned that. I think that, or not the tire, the thing before that. I think that those design conventions that emerge out of necessity are often the best ones or something.
Totally, yeah.
Like with the Bastion doc, a lot of it is because I have all that archival footage. I've managed to craft a lot of little sort of like chapter segmentation moments out of like combining Darren's music with archival footage of them 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's not that I had this genius idea that like this is how this story needs to be told. It's just, it emerges out of the materials you have, and then you just find the best way to tell that story, and it's always sort of like the natural answer is often the best one.
Yeah, a lot of editing, especially when you're editing under the time constraint that we have, which is pretty severe for most, I feel like, projects this long, shall we say. A lot of it is kind of just like you know, there's a chunk of water at the top of the mountain and you find the fastest way down to the bottom.
Yeah.
And then sometimes there are like elements that you want to put in that take a little bit longer to get there, and you kind of decide to do that, but oftentimes it's just kind of, hopefully you've gained enough experience in editing to find the best, fastest way down the mountain. But yeah, that project ended up coming out, I feel like, pretty good. I don't care about the reception of stuff too much. I don't want to piss people off.
Yeah.
But on that one, I really wanted to speak to those people's experiences. And from what I heard from the Facebook group, we did a good job.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe some people really liked it, but I didn't hear a lot of people saying we fucked it up. So.
Yeah, I talked to one ex-Telltale person who said that they were very pleased with the representation, and that it was someone who had helped you organize this project. And that the shots of the bar where they used to go and drink after work, that like the fact that we actually went to that bar and got shots was like, the only people who will ever realize that are people who either hear us saying this or people who work at Telltale. So it's kind of nice to stitch in these little threads of little secret Easter egg kind of stuff.
Yeah, the only other physical place they talked about that wasn't the office or that bar was the park where they did the read for the first Walking Dead.
Yeah.
But we couldn't figure out which park it was, so we ended up just like using any park footage, I think it was, in that shot. There was one other doc we did back in spring from the GDC sessions, which was the FTL Into the Breach one, which was a lot of fun, because that was another documentary I wanted to do, like a big style, but this actually worked. Some of the stories like aren't big enough to do the whole big doc on. They're just like, they either don't involve enough people, or there's, the level of complexity is, if one person has a lot of the complexity, then they find it's difficult for them to go deep on the complexity. So it's easier with a team of 5 people, because then they can all go a little bit deep, and then you've got all the collaborative depth there. So for those games, it's really hard because there's only 2 dudes.
Yeah.
So like, they're not going to remember or be able to speak to so much of that stuff, or it'll take forever to get them to remember it. So I think that really worked. We continued our Hades journeys into the summertime with we managed to get the art and music into one doc, because that was the thing everyone was asking for, but it's so hard to cram it into any of the other narratives.
Yeah, it's sort of a separate topic. It's interesting on the larger docs. That's always sort of a square peg to find where you talk about aesthetics.
Yes.
Which it's so odd, especially with something like Bastion. Like in the Bastion doc, music and art are such important parts of the development of that game.
Right. Supergiant games are just, a large part of them is defined by.
Yeah. Like they're mechanically genius games, but like the thing that, like the reason I found about Transistor was because of people were like, oh, there's this beautiful indie game. It's like this painterly, like beautiful thing. And it's funny, so we finally got to devote an entire episode just to the genius of the art and music from that. I really liked that Hades episode.
It involved a lot of interesting filming on your part as well.
Yeah, I got to go hang out at Darren Korb's house for a day, which was really fun. I just watched him like record a song and just like write music all day, and we just hung out and drank coffee. He and I are still due for a synthesizer date. He's going to come over and play with my Moog, which sounds dirty if you don't know anything about synthesizers. And then I got to hang out with Jen and Joanne from the art team and film them working a little bit, look at a little bit of their process, and dug up some Hades files and got to see like kind of the layers get added to it and see how the sausage is made. Totally,
yeah. It allowed us to go a little bit deeper on that stuff, which oftentimes, it's quite, you can't help but touch it on a surface level, but you kind of have to be intentional about getting deeper. And also cool to interact with people like Joanne, because there is a whole bunch of people who we don't interview, which we're slowly trying to creep into in each of the docs, and not just have it be about those sort of main 5 or 6 people we talked to. So that was fun too.
Yeah, I also, like, I'm someone who's interested in music production, so when I talk to Darren and we're filming for the broader Hades episodes, like, he'll be like, oh yeah, and then we record this instrument and I bounce it to the track. And the question I want to ask is like, what plugins are you using, and like what's the compression look like on this and stuff like that. But that's way too granular for a games documentary.
Yeah.
So this was like our opportunity to be like, so like what's the amp rack look like, man? Just like nerd out a little bit about that stuff.
The next one we did was an interesting experiment, and one we're gonna go back to. It was the look at E3.
Yeah.
Inside E3. It was kind of like a travel doc. Like, we shot it from the hip, or you shot it rather from the hip. Some of it you shot on your own because I got food poisoning and was stuck in bed for 2 days. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I think we did all right, all things considered.
Yeah, I reached out subsequently with Corrado over at IGN just to say thank you so much for hosting that whole section, because that was not what we agreed.
Yeah.
And he was super cool about it. He's a nice dude. And I think just involving I think I didn't want to cover the press side of things forever, because it just felt like we were recording videos with our mates.
Yeah.
But it turns out people are really into the press side of things. Like, a subset of our audience was very interested in a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I like, having just worked at GameSpot for a little under 2 years, which is obviously where we met. It was like, I remember going to the war room, the GameSpot war room, where everything happens for my first E3.
Ooh.
And it was like over time, by the end of that week, you're like, I never want to see this place again. But at the beginning of that, I was like having these flashbacks to when I was 12 years old reading Nintendo Power, and they're talking about like E3. And I was like, what is this like Shangri-La of video games where like people come and they like ply their, it's like the bazaar in Aladdin where everyone's like plying their wares, but all of their wares are rad video games. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. So it is cool. Like, I see the appeal. I think people in the industry get a little jaded and they're like, oh, you go and you cut 100 videos and you get out of there, smoke a cigarette. But there's magic there, man. It's cool. It's exciting.
I don't know. I get why people might get tired on it or whatever.
Yeah.
I dreamt about going to E3 for so long. I will never dislike a moment of it. It was just, I adore it. So being able to do the video and kind of like share the experience a little bit of how it works, and also kind of peek behind the curtain a little bit, like having the interview with Marcin Nowinski, for instance, was like, that was a cool like aspect that we don't get to talk about, where like, we're not actually talking to him about his game, we're talking about how he talks about his game.
Yeah,
with
so
the
meta.
press. Yeah, it was like that sort of stuff really was interesting to me. Or talking to Jason at the end of the week, Jason Schreier, about the stories and his tactics for interviewing Marcin and like stuff like that. It was, I don't know, it added like it was like stuff we don't really talk about. It's kind of on the fringes of all these things.
Yeah.
And maybe not everyone's interested in that, but I think some people are like really interested in it. So it was kind of cool to do that. And also, like, it was a fun project to edit, because it was like nothing I'd done before. Maybe it was a fun project to shoot, I'm not sure. It was like a different type of project to shoot.
Yeah, no, it was fun to do. The doc stuff we do is a lot of interviews and B-roll are sort of the two major categories. So it's always fun when we have an excuse to, like, in the Hitman stuff, not to get ahead of ourselves, we did some filming of like game design stuff over the shoulder at someone's desk, just like pulling up the engine and pulling things apart, and like, that's really fun. And I think the appeal of that stuff is the same as the appeal for this behind the lens journalism kind of stuff, where it's like, you don't have to be a journalist or a game designer to be intrigued by the process of journalism or game design. And I think that, like, yeah, I don't know. It's fun just to see someone who's really good at something that you enjoy the end product of make that thing, and like, even if you don't understand it, you can appreciate it or something. It's just, yeah, it's all. I think it's funny how comfortably the Inside E3 doc fits into our sort of canon of work. It's the same genre. It's just a different type of person doing it.
I felt like a large part of this year was trying to go broad, so that then we could kind of like. I don't know, like, I've talked about this a little bit before, so I won't go into it too much, but like the idea of like trying to put as many different colors on the canvas as possible, so people don't pigeonhole us. They don't just expect one type of thing from us. Because I feel like next year we're probably going to focus on our, as Herman would say, our core competencies. Who's now running the show over at Worldwide Studios.
He knows about competencies.
Totally,
man. It's a competent man.
Congratulations on the promotion. yeah, whereas I think like doing all this stuff kind of was like a freeing kind of like, oh, we're gonna, like the first half of the year we did a doc on grief, we did a documentary about losing your job, we did a documentary about how E3 works, and then we also peppered in all these other things, and the series, like it was all like weird different stuff that we'd never done before. So it was fun then to kind of do, I guess, a traditional Noclip series, which we hadn't done in a little while. Like maybe The Witcher. No, when was the last time we did like a multi-part? Maybe it was in this vein anyway, where the Hitman doc, which finally came about, it was so, man, this one cost a lot of money because they kind of just said like right before E3 they said, oh, we have a window here.
Yeah.
Like 2 weeks after E3, can you do it then?
Yeah, just pop over.
I'm like, sure. Flights to Copenhagen, you buy in a month. Fuck. Okay. Yeah, we can do it. Whatever. Let's do it. Because I'd been turned down twice already, I guess, at that stage. And I was like, okay, we need to just get this one done at this stage.
Yeah.
And it ended up being like just the best. I had so much fun. That was a fun studio.
Yeah.
Those interviews were great. Copenhagen, that meetup.
Yeah.
You're not wearing a shirt today,
War
sadly.
Pigs.
Your War Pigs barbecue.
I was wearing that shirt in downtown Berkeley in this very like stereotypical sort of like maybe like late 30s, early 40s kind of like stonery dude in flannel walks by, and he gave me the most like lingering stare at my War Pig shirt, and he looked up at me and we made eye contact and he just went, War Pigs. And then it's like
he didn't know what it was,
yeah,
but
like,
he was just like saying
he was
okay.
just into it, whatever it was.
War
he wanted
Pigs.
he was like, what is that, like Pink Floyd or something, man?
Yeah,
but
like, no, it's a restaurant in the meatpacking district of Copenhagen where we got very drunk.
Yes.
And closed out the place.
Yeah, that was
great.
a really fun meetup.
Yeah, that was awesome. And yeah, the videos we put out, we had a bunch. We had the Fall and Rise of Hitman, which was all about sort of their breakup with Square Enix, which was weirdly amicable, that whole thing, which was fun. We'd obviously interviewed Matsuda-san in Japan years previously, so it was interesting to hear people talking about him from the perspective at I.O. We did a whole video about how the simulation of a level works. We did a video on the trick behind the sort of how the levels are designed in an architectural perspective. And then we also did a really fun one about them redesigning not just Agent 47, but also the sort of character, the lexicon or the Rolodex of characters that exist in that world, and the sort of interesting version of like James Bond Hitman that they made. I think there are some episodes like the Doom doc. I always think the first two are strong, and the third one's kind of a little bit of like, oh, here's the leftovers we had. And the Witcher one, there was one of them that was a little bit of a here's everything else. Number 6, I forget what that one was. This series I thought was like, oh, every one of these was a banger.
Yeah,
they were all like interesting and different and unique in their own kind of. They had their own thing they were talking about.
Do you think that is that an emergent property of just like you get lucky and everything kind of like you get back and everything kind of fits, or is it purely like more intentional interview style, or is it kind of just like a mix? Like you try your best to get everything to kind of fit into a box, and then at the end you see how neatly it ended up.
Yeah, I guess you never know exactly what the ingredients you're going to get, but I think none of it would happen without being a bit more or a lot more like planning. Like everything now I plan a lot more. I think mostly because I'm tired of post-production, of like fixing things in post-production, which happens a lot where you're like, this one doesn't work, or this could be 2 stories or 1 story, and you spend like 3 days putting them all into their own timelines and seeing if they work. Whereas like I'm so disinterested in doing that now. Or like the Witcher stuff ended up being more videos than I thought because we just covered so much, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but like if you're planning, it's not great.
Yeah.
So I think for that one I was kind of like, oh no, I think the 3 I wanted to do were simulation level and the story. And then I was taking a swing at the last one because I didn't know what the writer would be like, and he ended up being fantastic. He was just so eloquent and great to talk about. And then we had the 4th one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of like it depends project to project, but for that one for sure it was a lot of like planning, especially because it was a project that we hadn't planned, so it kind of came out of nowhere. Speaking of projects that came out of nowhere, which I did nothing, and it's not even on this page. I forget why I sent you, or why I didn't go. I think maybe it was a cost thing, or I guess I was going to Ireland maybe for my vacation in the summertime. But we'd collaborated with Chris Pratt over at People Make Games, our good friend, Did I say Chris Pratt just there?
You did.
I did.
I was going to correct you, but I was going to wait till you finished.
Chris Pratt. Sorry, Chris.
Handsomer than Chris Pratt.
Absolutely. Way more swole.
Yeah.
Way more woke. Way more cool.
Way more woke and swole.
Yeah. I was excited to work with him forever. I've loved his work at Eurogamer. When he started People Make Games, I was like super jazzed about it. And then, we didn't even, it wasn't like we wanted a doc on Creative Assembly. I just wanted to do a doc with him. And I remember reaching out and being like, what do you think? What's a good story? What is one that you think would be worthwhile? Hopefully one that I would know nothing about. And he said Creative Assembly, and I was like, slam dunk, go for it. So I basically didn't touch any of this. I have done in post-production, and it's the first thing that's going to be edited once we get back in January. But what was it like for you heading out there? And because you had to sort of, armchair produce a bunch of this stuff as well, because Chris, he's well able to do his own thing, but obviously he wanted to keep towards our style as well. What was that whole process like?
Yeah, so I was excited to work with Chris as well. I really like his work. I obviously checked out even more of it, knowing that I was going to work with him, because I just wanted to get more familiar with his style and kind of anticipate like what our collaboration would be like. But Chris is an absolute gentleman. We got on super well. Like, it was really fun and casual. It wasn't like there was no social dynamic to kind of like navigate. We were both there to make kick-ass stuff and both like excited about it and excited to collaborate. Like, he obviously likes our stuff and we like his stuff. But yeah, it went really smoothly. Most of it was just kind of navigating like electrical problems. I brought 2 adapters, and for whatever reason, like both of them went on the fritz during that. I don't know if it's maybe the bed and breakfast I was staying at was full of poltergeists, but I think the hardest thing about it was just keeping everything charged and not blowing up lights. But the actual documentary process was really smooth. Chris was super professional. He knew what he was talking about. There is a lot in that doc, though.
Yes,
editing that doc is going to be quite the odyssey.
Yeah, I've already started hacking and slashing at it, but there's a lot in there. And then also Chris went and filmed in the north of Italy, or somewhere in Italy, for the elusive final interview that we needed to tell the story properly. So there was a lot there. It was cool. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed seeing what's happened, and the stuff you filmed there in Horsham as well looks great.
Yeah, thank you.
So that'll be coming in 2020. But we did film it, so I thought it would be rude not to mention it here. One thing we did film after that, I guess, was the last East Coast thing. Although actually, it's worth mentioning that I also filmed a bunch of Able Gamers stuff as well, which will be coming out. There's an elusive final interview on that project as well, which we're going to get to. But that stuff will be coming 2020 as well. But the last one we put out, I guess, was just about to hit 100K, which isn't bad for a weird little project that took a year's worth of talking back and forth to get done. Was our look inside of the ESRB.
Yeah.
The first time they'd ever had cameras inside. Although some people sent me some G4 video that was filmed that had some bits and bobs, but it was pretty surface level.
They couldn't just let us have it.
No, they couldn't. No,
we were all excited.
It's the internet, man.
You gotta, like, hey, man, someone beat you to it.
Hey, they're not wrong, technically.
Yeah, true that.
But yeah, we got to talk to all those folks about their job. I got to spend the minimum amount of time I wanted to getting the loot boxes thing out of the way. I've talked at length about how I personally think it is, like, I get why people want to backwards program it and make ESRB fix that problem, but that's an issue with the ESA. It's not, or it's an issue with government regulation or something. But right now it doesn't fall underneath their permit or their remit. Sorry. And you can read all about it and figure that out for yourself. So we had a little bit of people saying like, oh, why didn't you talk to them more about loot boxes? And I was like, well, the 4 minutes of this video was the maximum I was going to, you'd get lost in the weeds on this issue, which they're connected to because of sort of like misconceptions within the gaming zeitgeist because of Angry Joe and other people.
Yeah.
But I didn't want that to like detract. It was like a magnetic force that could have easily torn apart the focus of the documentary, but also it wasn't one that I wanted to ignore fully.
Yeah.
But it was cool to. We had the best feedback I have was we had a lot of game developers who watched it who were like, okay, now I get it. Because they're communicating with them a lot, but maybe they don't really, they probably communicating quite business-like fashion.
Yeah, like facelessly.
Yeah.
Like they kind of just see the end result. They don't know what's going on inside of the black box.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think for a lot of them, it was like, oh yeah, okay, I get that. Or like, yeah, that makes sense or whatever. So
yeah, that they're just a bunch of people who like care about what they're doing. And like a bunch of them are just really passionate about video games and like...
Yeah, and like, I think for me, it was mostly I wanted to like dive into the process of like, how does this stuff work? Like, what is it like rating a game? How long do people look at it? Why do they not play them? Why do they do this? Yada, yada, yada. So it ended up being quite a fact. It was like what I wanted to do was I wanted the ESRB Wikipedia page to have to get a rewrite because of what we put out.
Yeah.
And it seems like that was the case.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I think the best forms of like journalism and documentary filmmaking are just people following natural curiosity. Kind of like good inventions are inventions where someone's like, oh man, I really wish I had something to like put these eggs in so they didn't shatter. And so they make the egg carton. Like I think it's like, oh, there's not enough information about the ESRB. Really wish someone would just like sit down for a few hours, a couple days and talk to them about it. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, I could be that guy.
Right.
So it like you feel that natural curiosity in it. Like it just feels like someone sitting down and being genuinely curious about their process.
Right. I was happy to put it out and to not put out something that's like this fucking tabloidy, sexy headline kind of thing, but to just be like, this job is as boring as everyone else's job. This is what they do. And it's interesting in these ways that you might find interesting, but it's also like not like, people. It was fun. I was waiting for people to mention like hot coffee or something, which again is like the one story about the SRB that has been told over and over and over again. So I tried to indirectly tell it via the like when they get stuff wrong, how all that stuff works. But it's even interesting seeing that like nobody was commenting about hot coffee. It's like this generational thing. It's like there's like one story to do with censorship or whatever, and it's different for every generation. So yeah, I was happy to not get caught in the weeds of any of that stuff and kind of just tell something that I thought was a bit more evergreeny, a bit more like, in 10 years' time, this will probably still be the case. Yeah. We'll see.
I like that one a lot.
Thank you. Me too. It was a fun one. And our final one was one we filmed 3 years ago, which we finally got out.
It's been fermenting like a fine wine.
It has. Fermenting so much that Tim Willits has since left id and gone to work at a new studio.
I hope it's not because we didn't release this documentary.
I don't know if he retweeted it, actually.
Oh, no,
I should
Tim.
check. He hadn't after a day or two. Yeah, I don't know. He's probably a bit like, God damn it, I gave those guys a wrapped copy of Quake 3, which we put in the video.
Yeah, we were too busy playing Quake 3 to make this video.
Quake 3, I guess, turned 20, so thought, what better excuse to put that one out. And I think we talked about it on the podcast as well already, so you can go check that one out if you want to. And then I guess the last ones that we filmed were the ones that we're kind of cutting now, which is the Bastion Pyre Transistor stuff we filmed right when I got back, when I moved back.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah, that was like, I think was that the first thing we filmed when you got back?
I think it was like a week or two, a week after I got in or something.
Yeah, you really hit the ground running on that.
Yeah, we still hadn't really unpacked properly or anything. That was fun. That was cool. It was my first time actually being there while you were doing the interviews. Yeah. So that was rad. And they flew over Logan and everyone was around. We interviewed the whole original 7, I think.
Yes.
For those. You're almost done editing that one?
Yeah, Bastion is just about done. It's been a weird process because usually when I edit something, I just spend a week doing nothing but that, and then get it into like rough cut shape, come back to it the next week and polish it off. And then this has been stretched across like 3 partial weeks where I get like a couple days each week where like parts of those days are devoted to the doc. So it's been weird for me just because it's like I feel like I've been working on it forever. Yeah. But collectively it's been like 4 days or something.
Welcome to my world.
I know, it's crazy. I don't know.
Spend like 4 hours doing taxes.
I don't know how you do it. It's driving me nuts, but it's cool. I feel like I'm getting a lot of perspective on the project as well because each time you step away from it, you come back to it and you're like, oh well, if I just switch those 2 shots, this whole thing like will cohere.
That's the benefit, I think.
Yeah.
Is that you end up making something that maybe breathes a little bit more.
Yeah, like it hangs out in your head and you kind of get to process it. Like you have those shower thoughts where like I sent myself an email. I like reached out of the shower and grabbed my cell phone and was like, oh, what if I had that like soundbite of Jen and I had like threw it in there? And it's like you can't force those insights. You kind of just have to let it ferment inside of you.
Yeah, I just had one of those when I was driving home yesterday about the Outer Wilds one, which will be going up after Bastion. So we're aiming for Monday for Bastion, fingers crossed, and then the following Monday for Outer Wilds, but we'll see how it all sort of ends up. Because I know you've got only a day and a half left on it, and then I have to help with some of the lower thirds and graphics and the credits and stuff like that.
Feeling good though. I just gotta. Cool. I need one more song and some B-roll, and then we're in documentary town.
Awesome. And then Outer Wilds, I'm going to be because you're heading off for the next couple of weeks on your sort of annual birthday pilgrimage.
Yes.
In the RV,
into
which
the
sounds
desert.
rad.
Yeah. I'll take pictures.
Awesome. I'm not. I sometimes go home to Ireland, but our kid is like the wrong age for an 11-hour flight.
Yeah.
She's like 17 months old now, so we're going to stay local. So I'm actually going to be in Christmas week on the Monday and Friday, so I'm going to be doing some editing then, and also painting some more walls and putting up some more of this wood stuff to sort of even all that out. So that'll come out then, and that'll wrap up if it comes out on that Monday, which it should do. I think it's the 30th of December, so it'll be the second day of the year and the second last day of the year we put up our videos.
Nice.
So nicely rounded out.
Finishing out the year strong. I feel like we did a lot of documentary filmmaking this year.
Yeah.
Like a lot.
We didn't even talk about the Edmund McMillan stuff.
Yeah.
I guess he tweeted out that we're doing a Gish thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he did yesterday. I didn't notice.
Cool. Yeah,
he,
I didn't either.
He tagged Noclip but not me, so I guess Frank saw it, but I didn't.
Oh, awesome.
Shout out to Frank as well, who did loads of work this whole week,
Yes.
whole year, who is behind the scenes all the time. Came on board around E3 and helped us a bunch there as well, which was rad. He tweeted it. So we're doing a project. We're doing two projects with him. One is a sort of a roundup of his games he's made, kind of in the vein of the Tim Willits one. So we cover everything from his Flash games up to Bumbo, which came out last month. So that's going to be coming in January, and the other one, which I think might be January too. Depends. I don't know when we'll see what happens, but it might be February actually. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. He's doing a re-release of sorts of Gish, which is a game that a lot of people haven't played of his, which was out before Super Meat Boy.
I love Gish.
So I had played loads of Gish as a kid. Me and my buddy Dennis used to play Gish. It's such a weird little game.
Yeah.
Physics platformer. You played it as well?
Yeah, I played it a bunch way back in the day before I kind of realized that indie games was this thing that was happening. Like, it was just this weird kind of like game that existed that wasn't a AAA game and wasn't like a Newgrounds game.
It was before Steam, so you had to like buy it off their website or something. It was, or I think the demo a lot of people played. I think that's how I played it mostly at the start.
Yeah.
It was a weird thing, and I guess we're 2 for 3 now on Indie Game to Movie interviews. So we just need Phil Fish to complete the set.
The trifecta,
right? We did Jonathan Blow obviously the first week, the first couple of months in on Noclip, first year. When he got in contact over and him and Alex Austin, who runs Cryptic Sea, he's like a physics game like legend, and I've wanted to do a doc with Alex forever. His game Sub Rosa he's been working on for the best part of a decade probably at this stage. He tweets like videos. It's like a 100% physics based FPS. It's like he just like makes the most interesting games. They worked on Blast Miner and stuff like that as well. We interviewed him over at Other Ocean in the arcade room, and then we've interviewed Edmund at his house. So the two of those are going to get combined to make a documentary all about Gish, which is I think it's really funny to do a documentary that includes Edmund McMillan, which focuses on maybe the game people know the least about. It reminds me of the Frog Faction stuff a bit, where it's like, oh, you might not know about this. If you know about this, you know about this. But if you don't know about this, we're going to fucking tell you why you should know about this.
That's part of the fun, though, is like getting to point the, point the lens, I guess, or like shine that light on something that's a little unexpected. Yeah. Like it would have been cool to do a Binding of Isaac doc, but like it's fun to talk about Gish.
And we covered that stuff in the other interview as well. So we get into Isaac and Meat Boy and all that stuff in the other thing. But the focus of that project was definitely the Gish. There's an element of that project which we were not talking about yet, which you'll find out in time. So that's a kind of a fun, interesting first for us that we're looking forward to working on. That was the year. That was 2019. Thanks for all your work, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you, man.
I know I forgot to pay you this year, so
like my landlord is like super pissed.
Got a lot of invoices that I'll get to them eventually. Is that okay?
I see that stack on your desk, and I'm just like, come on, man.
Yeah, instead of doing them in order, what I've done is I've put them on an Excel spreadsheet, and I've done them in order of cost from least to highest. So I'm just going to do it in that order. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So that first one where you forgot to bill me for like a couple of cups of coffee, you're going to get that in January.
There's a lot of complications, a lot of red tape and bureaucracy in our payment system.
Now, thank you for all your work this year, and also thank you for taking this leap with me into the studio, because I know it's a difficult thing to do, because you also have have done commercial work in the past, and you're obviously sacrificing a lot of that to do this sort of stuff. So.
Nah, dude, it's like I take like 1 or 2 gigs outside of Noclip the last couple of years, and it's just, you know, because we've been growing and figuring out what this is, and it's like I don't want to put too much pressure on you to like invent work for me to do if I don't have other things to do. Like I've always hated jobs where it's like, oh, there's nothing left to do. What should I do? And they're like, oh, why don't you sweep up around the shop for 5 hours? And it's like, there's not that much dust to sweep.
Yeah.
I always feel like the stuff we do is very intentional, and I feel like we give it enough time that it, like, we give it enough love and enough time, and we have that luxury to spend time on stuff, but we work very efficiently. And I feel like we hit a really nice balance between not padding the work we do and inventing tasks and creating stuff where it's like, oh, today we're gonna buy screwdrivers, but like I just feel, it feels very intentional to me, and it's really cool to do this stuff. And yeah, I don't know, it's cool to feel it scale up, and it's cool to edit side by side with you and kind of like picture where things are headed and figure out where we want to steer this ship. Yeah,
and it's going to be an interesting year. 2020 is kind of like a real red letter year for us, I guess, because obviously the output's going to increase. We're going to be pushing a good bit more in terms of our funding. Maybe we'll end up growing the team at some stage. Like, that would be the ideal thing, was to maybe get someone else to help us out with even more stuff. We'll just have to wait and see, I guess. But a massive thank you to all of you listening, all of you who listen to us or watch our documentaries, sort of especially to all the patrons out there who've been funding us, if you were in the past or you're thinking about it in the future or you are now. Literally none of this work would be possible without you. So thank you so much. Like we said, I want to clarify one thing, which I think I had 1 or 2 people message me who became patrons and then couldn't get access to the RSS feed. The podcast is at the $5 tier for the bonus podcast, but also with that $5 tier, you get access to like a shed load of like extra videos. Like the patron show went up this morning. It has like clips from both the Bastion and Outer Wilds docs and a bunch of other stuff, and all our behind the scenes videos are there as well. We will be doing a tier refresh in 2012 or 2020 2012 Jesus,
we'll be going back in time. Real
refresh. Yeah, it's the Outer Wilds again. We'll be doing that, and we'll tell you all about that sort of stuff. And there's also going to be other things happening, like the return of some of my shows that I used to do in the past, and some interesting new ones over on the Danny O'Dwyer channel. So that's all to come as well. But for now, we're going to get back to editing. That's us signing off for the rest of the year. We'll be back in early January to back on the podcast. But until then, we hope you have a wonderful Christmas, wonderful holidays, have a good new year, and I guess we'll see you on the other side.
See you next year.
Take care.